Welcome to the Longevity Formula with Dr. Brandon Crawford. Let's explore the new era of wellness.
Welcome to the Longevity Formula, the podcast where we explore a new era of wellness through the pillars of faith, light, movement, mindset, nutrition, and science. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Crawford, and today we're diving into one of the most powerful yet underappreciated weapons in the longevity arsenal, antioxidants. Here's something most people don't know. Oxidative stress is happening in your body right now, quietly damaging your cells, accelerating aging, and setting the stage for chronic disease. But what if I told you there's an antioxidant so powerful it can cross the blood-brain barrier, protect both the inside and outside of your cell membranes, and has been shown to support everything from eye health to athletic performance? And what if most people have never even heard of it? Our guest today is Samuel Shepard from Valasta. Samuel is a leading expert in Astaxanthin, hope I said that right, supplementation, and has dedicated his career to understanding how this remarkable antioxidant can transform human health and longevity. Valasta has pioneered high-quality astaxanthin formulations that are changing the way people think about cellular protection and age-related decline. The truth is, we're living in an era of unprecedented oxidative stress. Environmental toxins, blue light exposure, processed foods, chronic stress, they're all creating free radicals that attack our cells faster than our bodies can neutralize them. And while you might be eating berries and taking vitamin C, the question is, are you really getting the level of antioxidant protection your body needs to thrive into your 80s, 90s, and beyond? So today, we're going deep. We're talking about the antioxidant hierarchy, why astaxanthin stands apart from every other antioxidant you've heard of. We'll explore oxidative stress as a silent ager, discuss whether you can really eat your way to enough antioxidant protection, and break down exactly how to build an antioxidant strategy that actually moves the needle on longevity. If you've ever wondered whether your supplements are working, or if you're doing enough to protect your brain, heart, and cells from aging, this episode is for you. So, Sam, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Brandon, thanks for having me. And it's a lot of information that we probably need to get out, at least to the general public.
Absolutely. Okay, so the first thing is, I know that I butchered how to say the name of astaxanthin. So let's get the pronunciation correct first. So it's astaxanthin, right?
Correct.
All right. Astaxanthin. Okay, so I'm probably going to say that wrong again at some point in time, so feel free to correct me. So let's first kind of learn a little bit about you, because you have a bit of a personal story that goes along with the discovery or with your discovery of pioneering in this field. So what's going on there?
Well, it goes back years. Cancer is one of those things that starts about 5 to 15 years before it ever presents. It's very difficult to go back epidemiologically and figure out a cause as to what happened with cancer. I think that's what happened in my case. I worked in the petrochemical industry. I built and developed electromagnetic pulse weapons, auditory weapons, and bioweapons for the Department of Defense. And I may have gotten a little too close to something that I probably shouldn't have. But I ended up in 2003 being diagnosed with an incurable bone cancer called polycythemia vera. And my blood pressure would spike to 280 over 160. I'd go in, they'd knock me down to try to keep me from stroking out. I'm the only guy that I know of that's ever pegged for blood pressure cuffs. They kept testing them, and 300 millimeters is as high as it goes.
Oh my gosh.
And they thought the blood pressure cuffs were broken, so they would go get another one. And that one would peg out. And then they finally decided, man, you need to be hospitalized. So I didn't stroke. I didn't have any, thank goodness. My arteries were in pretty good shape.
Right.
But I got a phone call on a Sunday night from a nurse that said the doctor wanted to see me at 7:30 Monday morning. If anyone ever gets that call, it is not good.
Right.
So went in, he came in, wheeled right up to me, put his hands on my knees, and he said, Sam, I got some bad news. He said, you've got a blood cancer called polycythemia vera, incurable. And I said, well, what about chemo or radiation? He just shook his head no. And I asked what my options were, and he said phlebotomies. So every month for 4 years, I was phlebotomized just to keep my red blood cell count down.
Yeah.
And that got a little old. After about 4 years, my life, I asked him how long I had. He said, with this form of cancer, 97% of the people perish within 10 years. But my hemoglobin was 27. My hematocrit was 80, 81, 82. It was pretty high. So I was in a vulnerable position of throwing a blood clot to my brain, my heart, or my lung at that point. And he said, if it could happen right now, and it would take me 10 minutes to declare you dead. So he gave me a window of 10 minutes to 10 years. So off to the hospital I went. That was my first phlebotomy. And I went in every month thereafter. After about 4 years of that, it got a little old. I noticed that the rate at which my hemoglobin was climbing out the slope was getting steeper. And I knew that I was probably going to throw a blood clot. So about 4 o'clock in the morning, I decided to try to figure out what was going on. I truly believed that God had given me all the tools I needed in my toolbox to figure this out. And with my background in biochemical engineering, I could figure out how the universe pretty much worked. But boy, this was a tough one.
Yeah.
So I, through research then, and I had access to a government database called ProQuest. And it's now made available. At that time, it wasn't. But so I queried it and asked for all the animals that apparently don't get cancer. And the query came back with these 5: salmon, pink flamingos, sharks, elephants, and naked mole rats. And I then was working on a project in San Diego. And so I went to Scripps Oceanographic and asked if they could get tissue samples of those animals. And they had them. And they said, well, I put up what's called a screening algorithm, which says I want a mass spec done on all those tissue samples. I want everything screened out. No proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, enzymes, no amino acids. And I wanted to see what molecule existed across all 5 of those species. So they came back and they said, well, we found one. And I was a little shocked, to be honest with you. And it was astaxanthin. So I asked where astaxanthin came from. It came from an algae called Haematococcus pluvialis. I began growing that in one of those, I call them hillbilly hot tubs, but these Intex hot tubs you can buy at Walmart.
Yeah.
In my backyard. And it had a bubbler. I could bubble CO2 in, and I put a cover over it, almost like a greenhouse. It was ideal for growing algae, just like a swimming pool is. You're always trying to kill algae in a swimming pool.
Exactly.
And so I got really good at growing it. And the algae itself is green in color. But I understood from the Salton Sea trials, or things that I looked at the Salton Sea area in California, that when the ponds begin to dry out, the color of the algae begins to change. There's several species that do this. Some turn purple, some turn red. Astaxanthin turns bright red. So what I did is figured out what causes that algae to go from a green algae to a red algae, because the red was the astaxanthin, and it was about 3.8% astaxanthin when it gets stressed. So I needed to find the stressor. So what the stressor is when the pond dries up, begins to dry up, the salt content increases. The algae senses that. And it says, my pond is drying out. I have to protect now against the ultraviolet rays of the sun, or I'm going to cook. So
fascinating.
It pushes the astaxanthin right out to its cell membrane, and it accumulates in little vacuoles right underneath the phospholipid membrane of the algae. The algae goes into the soil. When it rains 100 years from now, it resists and comes back as a viable algal form. So there was a whole life cycle of that. So I just added salt to my reactor, and it converted it from within 48 hours from a green algae into a bright red algae. So it's called dissolved air flotation. I bubbled air in, floated it to the surface, skimmed it off, put it in a dehydrator, and I knew it was 3.8% by weight inside the algae cells. So I could dose myself. So if I selected a 4 milligram or a 5 milligram dose, I could calculate how many grams of this red algae I had to eat. So I started out in that 4 and 5 milligram area, and I did that for about 3 months. Every day, I was taking 4 milligrams of this dried algae in my eggs, in my salad, but made sure that I consumed that much every day.
So was it dried, or did you just take it live? And how'd you
No, it was all dried algae.
Okay.
So my phlebotomies went from once a month after about 4 months of this to once every 2 months. So the slope of the climb out curve decreased.
Yeah.
So over 30 days, it's this steep. With the 4 milligrams, it's this steep. So then I thought, okay, this is moving in the right direction. And since it's a red algae, I wanted to make sure, because red things in nature technically could be quite toxic or poisonous, like red tide and all that. Yes. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't killing my liver or my kidneys. So I did blood work, and everything became normal. My A1C was running about 6.2 before this, and it dropped down to about 5.4. Wow. I didn't change anything. And I thought, well, this is a good sign. And it wasn't killing.
What time period was that?
About 4 months.
That's remarkable. That's great. Yeah.
So I thought, okay, 4 milligrams didn't kill me. Let's just triple the dose. So I went to 12 milligrams.
You sound like me.
Yeah. So more's got to be better, at least to the inflection point.
Right.
There's a dose response curve, and it follows almost like a normal distribution curve. Mm-hmm. You're okay. All right, you're optimal. Now you're dying.
Yes.
And it's sort of the way these things work. Yep. So I went to 12 milligrams a day, and my phlebotomies got pushed out within 2 months, got pushed out to once every 4 months. That was significant. That was statistically significant.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my golly, this is actually working. And so now I had 3 slopes of the curve. I had the control, no astaxanthin. I had 4 milligrams, and I had 12 milligrams. Now I could calculate with those 3 slopes, how much do I have to take so that I'm never phlebotomized for the next 50 years of my life? It's just a mathematical game. And it came out to be 96 milligrams a day. So
my goodness.
Yeah. So I started taking 100, and my phlebotomies ended. I cured myself of an incurable bone cancer. I cured myself. Now it was in 2013. I was declared cancer-free. So from diagnosis in 2003 to 2013, which I only had a 3% chance of making it there.
Yeah.
There was no trace of polycythemia vera.
Praise God, man.
Now I had to figure out why it worked.
Yeah.
And that one got to be costly, but I didn't trust anybody else. I didn't want to take money from a pharmaceutical company. I didn't want to go that route. So I ended up figuring out and found the 4 majors, and there's 5 actually, reactive oxygen species that cause 92% of all death from inflammatory disease. That includes cancer, heart disease, irritable bowel, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, Hashimoto's. They're all caused by those 4 free radicals. So the way that I developed it was I took a basic design of a tree, a giant oak tree. The root structure are all the things that add to our reactive oxygen stressed health condition. So we have diet, I have radiation, I have pollution, I have smoking, I have alcohol consumption, I have sugar, I have all these things that cause these free radicals to form. Well, the free radicals is the trunk of the tree. There's really only 5. There's a reactive nitrogen species, and then there's 4 oxygen species: superoxide, singlet oxygen, the peroxyl, and the hydroxyl free radical. The hydroxyl appears to be the one that's causing most of the problem. So, and then the branches of the tree are the presented diseases. So the doctors stand off to the side and they reach up and touch the branches, and they try to treat type 2 diabetes. They try to treat the effects of the trunk, that ROS causes those diseases. Yeah. So what we realized was that we're no longer treating the symptoms of disease. We're cutting the tree down. We're eliminating the ROS that causes those. So it doesn't make any difference. As long as you keep your inflammatory disease state at a biologically safe level, you won't present with any of those diseases. And that's how it worked. When we began to give it to people with arthritis, for example, their Parkinson's tremors ended. So we were getting these side benefits of it. Everybody presents differently, but the commonality is those 4 free radicals.
Yeah.
The oxygen free radicals.
I could just intervene just a little bit because I talk about this with my patients. I tell them, think about your cell and then largely your mitochondria within your cell like a combustion engine, right? And so
exactly right.
You go and you turn on your vehicle and it's, you have gears running, you have belts spinning, you have all this kind of stuff, and it's generating power to move you and to do work. Even if you're not smoking and you're not, doing all of those things, you're still producing friction within that engine. You're still producing an environment that just by how it's designed to run, it's going to develop inefficiencies if you don't service it, if you don't treat it properly. That's the same thing for your mitochondria. So I consider that friction, right, those inefficiencies developing within the engine of the mitochondria, I refer to those as these reactive oxygen species. And so the servicing then are using things like astaxanthin or astaxanthin to essentially do your oil changes and keep that engine serviced and running efficiently. Now, I don't know if you agree with that analogy or not.
I do. Yeah.
But I need people to understand, because I have a lot of people that will come in and they'll be like, look, I eat well and I exercise and I do all these things. Why do I need to take a supplement? Why do I need to do whatever? It's like, because you're still going to be, accelerating aging based on X, Y, and Z, right? So this is just a very, simple and very effective way to service your mitochondria, service your cells, keep them running as effective and efficiently as possible. So, but I love your analogy of the tree. That's brilliant. And how you're right, man, you cut this off at the root level. All those things like the fruit of that tree that are causing all the problems, they wither and die. That's brilliant. I love it.
And it absolutely works. Well, just to go back a little bit on the beginning, I ate the algae for a number of years and it worked. Then I thought I'd really get clever as a chemical engineer to extract the astaxanthin from the algae so I'm not eating so much of the biomass. So we did and developed a unit operation called a supercritical CO2 supercritical extraction. And you basically put the astaxanthin in a very high pressure CO2 environment. And the CO2 becomes a liquid, a solvent, and it dissolves the astaxanthin out. And then that liquid solvent is filtered. You push it into another pressure vessel and you slowly release the pressure, and the CO2 sublimes from a liquid directly into a gas, and it leaves pure astaxanthin in the bottom of the pan. So I knew that the astaxanthin in a dry form didn't apparently work because the stomach acid degraded it so quickly. So dry astaxanthin, powdered astaxanthin wasn't good. So we put it in a high omega-3 olive oil, and the olive oil had a protective liposomal form around it. So I began taking that. Well, that was the first indication when I did it at the same dose, 100 milligrams a day, with the new purified form of astaxanthin, my cancer returned.
No
And
way.
that was a very scary period of time. And so I just kept increasing the dose of the oil to try to get it to stop. And I ended up well over 800 milligrams a day of the pure oil to get it to stop. Well, if I'm eating the algae, I only was using 100 milligrams per day to stop the cancer. When I went to the purified form, all of a sudden I'm at over 800 milligrams per day to get the same effect. That's a pretty dramatic difference. What was different in the biomass? Was there something else in the biomass that was helping me? So we did a mass spec, and we found that the form of the astaxanthin in the natural biomass is in what's called the glucosidic form. What that means is that the algae can attach either a fatty acid or a sugar molecule directly to the OH on the astaxanthin, and it's called a glucosidic. We use this frequently in pharmaceutical medicines. We used it in bioweapons development to get it to absorb faster into the body. So when we did this CO2 supercritical extraction, we cracked that glucose off. And it wasn't there attached to the astaxanthin anymore. So it wasn't as absorbable in the pure form as it was in that glucosidic or glucose form. So I developed, based on the electromagnetic frequencies of vibrating the OH molecule on the astaxanthin and on the sugar, to the point that they would react without high temperature. They would stick together. So that's what Velasta is. That's what the patents are based on, is how did I stick that sugar back onto the astaxanthin.
Wow.
And
by having that glucose molecule on there, that would actually increase the uptake into the cell, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So what happens is when this now gets through, we have lipid protection for the HCl in the stomach, for the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So it makes it through the stomach, gets into the small bowel. The HCl is neutralized to a more neutral pH. The enzymes in the small bowel see that sugar and they immediately pull it in. It's called a Trojan horse, is what it is. So it's pulled right through. The sugar's absorbed very, very quickly. So it's absorbed into the bloodstream very fast. So now you have this glucose attached to the astaxanthin floating around in your bloodstream. Now, one of the things, and this took several years to figure out, but one of the things that we found is that cancer loves sugar.
Absolutely.
So cancer is operating on a very thin edge. It takes, I think it's 32 sugar molecules to make 2 molecules of ATP. In normal cells, it takes 2 molecules of sugar to make 2 molecules of ATP. Normal cells are much more efficient metabolically than the anaerobic nature of a cancer cell. So cancer is constantly looking for sugar, and it'll steal it. As your liver produces it, it has priority over all the sugar. So you cannot starve sugar unless you remove your liver. So you can cut all the sugar out you want. 87% of all the sugar that you use in your body is produced by your liver between 2 and 6 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
That's where it's done. So we tricked it. When the metabolic process happening in the mitochondria of a cancer cell creates a huge number of these OH zero charged free radicals. What that means is that it just has the same number of electrons as protons, 16 or 8 in an oxygen. Hydrogen has 1. So there's 9 electrons floating around. It always leaves 1 electron unpaired. That makes it highly reactive. No matter what it touches, it will steal an electron. So it's an OH zero charge. The pH of it's like a Lewis acid. The pH of an OH zero charge is less than 7, which means it's acidic. So the environment around the cancer cell thrives in a slightly acidic environment. That acid environment destroys neighboring normal cells and makes room for the cancer to grow. So when that glucosidic astaxanthin is sucked in, pulled right into the cancer cell splits the sugar off and uses it for fuel. But now the astaxanthin is intracellular. It's inside the cell. And it will donate an electron to that OH zero charge and make it an OH minus 1, a hydroxyl ion. That ion has a pH of 12 and immediately saponifies the phospholipid membrane of the cancer cell, and the cancer cell dies in 4 seconds.
That's beautiful. That is so brilliant how you worked through that. And I mean, it's just amazing. Your whole story is amazing. And this is just one of those really apparent moments where you have someone where, you were given a really bad diagnosis, just, terrible. And you used it not only to help yourself, but now to help so many other people. And your brilliance of being able to go to the drawing board and really reverse engineer this whole situation.
Yep.
I mean, hats off to you, man. You've done such a good job of
keep in mind that what I'm explaining to you is probably 30 years. There's a long time in between. Sure. When that's just the way the story goes. But this started in 2003, I guess 20 years, 25 years.
23 years, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm really curious. I had a whole line of questioning but I have another line of questioning that I'm actually developing from listening to you. So I'm really curious about dosing, right? Because when I was using astaxanthin, everything said, start with like 1 milligram, right? But I mean, you started with 4, you went up to 800. So if we're using your product, right? So let's talk about me.
Mm-hmm.
I have Hashimoto's. I keep it relatively well managed. If my stress levels go up, my antibodies go up, but my inflammatory markers are all within range now. I do, a lot of regenerative medicine, laser therapy, all the things. So someone like me trying to keep that Hashimoto's in check and just, I've got a, stressful lifestyle, run multiple businesses and all that. What type of dose with your product should someone like me be on?
There's a couple ways to determine it. What we look at is your HSCRP.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see where your baseline inflammatory disease state is currently.
Okay. Well, it was like 15, and then then I started really working on it. Not just that, but my apolipoprotein B was in the severe range. My homocysteine was elevated. I had several inflammatory issues.
Yeah, they all go together.
Yeah, absolutely.
HSCRP is greater than 3. You're going to get an inflammatory disease. It's just a matter of time.
Right. And now, right, obviously by doing multiple things, largely I started doing monthly extracellular vesicles. We have a really high dose, very pure product that we use. That combined with my new lasers, actually, I've got various protocols with the lasers and all the things that I'm doing. So all those inflammatory markers are now within normal range, even the apolipoprotein B. Really, the main thing that's unchecked is my antibody levels. My TPO and my thyroglobulin antibodies are still like 250. They're still pretty high. So that's the main thing going on.
The way we look at it is we look at your body weight. We want every cell in your body to be saturated with astaxanthin in the cell membrane. So what we do is we actually calculated from, I don't want to get really technical here, but Avogadro's number. We looked at the number of cells in the body. If we had how many molecules of astaxanthin do we need? We assume about a 30% actual absorption into the body. So we did it by molecule and by the number of cells that you have in your body. So the number of cells is directly related to body weight. So through a pretty long process, we started out at about a 0.5 milligram per kilogram of body weight. That would,
milligram per kilogram body weight. Okay.
So we started out at that low dose, and that assumed a certain efficacy of getting the cells saturated. Then as we progressed, we found that in some cases they saw the HSCRP drop and it flattened out. So then we'd bump it again. So we worked towards the dosing. Now we're up to about 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight.
Nice.
And that protects you then, especially in highly active mitochondrial situations where you're processing a lot of fuel to generate ATP, which happens at the mitochondrial level. In that process at the mitochondria, you're generating a lot of exhaust gas. It's just the way energy, there's always waste when you produce energy. It's called Gibbs free energy. It's an entropic term that it applies to it. But the simple fact that we consume food requires that we generate these free radicals. And we oxidize ourselves. Now, why does it happen as we get older? When we're younger, we have 3 cellular antioxidants that protect us. We can do a lot of stupid things when we're younger. I could drink a lot of beer. I could stay up late. I could eat pizza, and I could get away with it.
Yeah, I've done those things.
Yeah, the reason is because we're producing a lot of glutathione, catalase, and superoxide dismutase.
Yes.
Those 3 cellular antioxidants that we produce when we're young. And I have the data and the curves to show this on the website. Is the average age for women, it drops almost 80% by the age of 42. They're no longer producing those antioxidants. It's nature's way of taking us out. For men, it's age 50. So when men turn 50, they start feeling arthritic, their tired level drops, their testosterone levels drop. All these things begin to happen because they're no longer producing glutathione. Their superoxide dismutase levels have dropped dramatically. Their catalase is really the last one, but it's not as effective as the glutathione. Mm-hmm. Now, when that happens, the changes begin to happen. So that's when we actually start generating, in most cases, it's a normal distribution, but in most cases, we start generating these diseases. And with children now, we're finding children that are sick are genetically not producing glutathione at the necessary levels to offset their oxidative stress metabolism.
Yes, they're being born with an amount of mitochondrial inefficiencies, let's just say, that is quite dramatic, more than, I mean, it's unprecedented, the amount of
it overwhelms their cellular antioxidant levels.
Yeah. And so that's a question I would want to pose to you, is because I have a high pediatric population, anything from autism, neurodevelopmental disorders, brain injury, you name it, right? We see a lot of kids. Is this something that kids can take? And then, do the same dosing strategies apply?
The same dosing strategies apply. And then we use markers. We use the CRP.
Okay.
We want to drive that CRP under 3 milligrams per liter. And typically, in pretty much all cases, the human body can handle an oxidative stress in that area of between, you'll never get it below 0.1. We have to have some inflammation just for our cells to communicate.
Right.
So it can never be 0. Right. But between 0.2 and 3, that's where you want to be. The lower you go, the lower your probability of generating an inflammatory disease. Mm-hmm. We have people targeting, if you want to get below 1, you just keep increasing the dose until you get there. And then you want to maintain there so you can reduce the dose a little bit, but we monitor the HSCRP.
Okay. So I do have a question, because you were talking about how, this produces essentially a pH of 12 within the cancer cells. Is this going to overall be alkalinizing for your body, or is it specific to those?
It's the only way that you can alkalize your body. You cannot eat alkaline foods because it gets neutralized by the acid in your stomach.
Right.
Now, there's the pH of your blood is always 7.35. If it's 7.3, you're in trouble. If it's 7.4, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So the biology keeps your blood pH at 7.35. There's no way to get to 12 and get alkalization to the cells through your blood system. It will not allow it. And if you force it, you'll get deathly sick. So what we found is that we have to deliver a chemical, glucosidic astaxanthin. It's a biochemical. We deliver it, and it's neutral. It has a neutral pH, so it gets into the bloodstream. And when it gets inside the cell and donates an electron, itself does not become a free radical, but when it donates that electron, it converts the hydroxyl free radical into a hydroxyl ion, and that's how we make soap. So let me go through. When we make soap, we take fatty acids, and we react it with sodium hydroxide. That makes lye. So back in the 1800s, that's how they made soap. They took animal fats, mixed it with ash from the burn pile, and they could make soap. Well, it's the same fatty acids in the cell membrane of a cancer cell. So when it sees that OH ion, it saponifies, and that's the chemical process. It converts the entire phospholipid membrane into a water-soluble soap, a detergent, and it breaks apart. The aqueous environment completely solvates that cell membrane, and the cancer cell ruptures, and all of the guts of the cancer cell flood into the area around it. It's picked up by the bloodstream. It's cleaned up with the macrophages, the neutrophils, and basophils, and T cells. It's cleaned up, and the amino acids are all recycled. So that's how it works. The advantage is when the cancer cell is saponified, it dies. It doesn't reproduce. Some normal cells can also be saponified, but they regenerate normally. But there's no side effects. It's the same way that chemo works, except that there's no side effects with this, and there's no regeneration of the free radicals. Chemo works by just saturating your body in brute force with an inflammatory disease. And it generates a huge concentration of these reactive oxygen species to go in and mutate the DNA, destroy the DNA, and hopefully it dies. The problem is you just mutated at a probability that can be calculated. You just mutated the DNA of normal cells. So you're going to get a representation of that cancer in 5 to 15 years caused by the chemo treatment.
Yeah. But we're not studying out that long, so it was a success, right? So.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So the other, really fascinating thing about astaxanthin is that it does cross into the brain. So it will pass through the blood-brain barrier, which is unique. Not everything will get into the brain, especially if we're taking it orally, right? The brain is very protected. So number one, how in the world does this, because it's not a small molecule. How does this get into the brain? It must be very beneficial for the neurons if our brain is just like sucking this up like a sponge.
Yeah, it's fat soluble. So at the endothelial level in the arteries, it has a tendency to plate out in those endothelial cell membranes. Once it passes through that, it can be readily absorbed. The other thing that the brain really wants is that sugar. So there are glucose, GLUT4 is a good example, but there's glucose channels all along the endothelial cells in the arteries that allow sugar to pass into the brain because the neurons need a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
And so that's the carrier mechanism. We found even without the glucose attached, it would linger in the arterial walls. And by what's called concentration gradient, the higher I make the concentration on one side of a membrane versus the other, there's what's called a concentration gradient, a diffusion coefficient that forces the astaxanthin through the cell membrane. So there's a couple ways that astaxanthin is absorbed. One is chemical transport with the glucosidic astaxanthin. The other one is concentration gradient, where you just build the concentration up so high on this side of the membrane of the arterial wall compared to the other side, and it mass diffuses through the cell membrane.
Okay, that's fascinating. So, there's a few other antioxidants that people know of more, right? Vitamin C, vitamin E, CoQ10,
turmeric, yeah,
glutathione, exactly. Yep. How does astaxanthin compare to these other guys? Is this like the king of the antioxidant world?
It is. There's no other antioxidant we've been able to find on the planet other than what's called dragon's blood, which is found in the bark of a tree in the Amazon. It's not available. But we measure it by what's called ORAC score, oxygen radical adsorption coefficient. Its ability to absorb hydroxyl free radicals. Well, let me give you an example. Turmeric has an ORAC score of about 122,000. Dark chocolate is 26,000. Dark chocolate's not all that bad for you. It actually has an antioxidant property to it. But turmeric, which is one that, or curcumin, are the very familiar ones, it has an ORAC about 122,000. The velocity in the glucosidic form is 2.2 million.
Oh my.
20 times more potent than turmeric for the same dose level. That is what really set this off. And now the NIH, you can go onto a search engine and just search NIH and astaxanthin and whatever disease, Hashimoto's, cancer, type 2 diabetes. They've all done the research on this. I testified in Congress in April of 2019 in Washington, D.C. There were about 200 people there. I think Ben Carson had his staff there. In the five majors, Johns Hopkins, Sloan, MD Anderson, Mayo, and the Cleveland Clinic were all present. They were shocked when I revealed to them that these four free radicals are the cause of 92% of all human death. They didn't like that because I'm at the cause level of disease. And it really was very disruptive because they treat the symptoms. They want the disease to present so that they can treat it. It becomes an economic decision. It's called remuneration bias.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that. I want the disease stopped. No more treatment of disease. That would be my ultimate goal, is there is no more disease to treat. And that's very offensive to the medical industry.
Very. There's no money in that, man.
No. There's no money in a cure. You've probably heard that before.
Absolutely. Well, would it be beneficial? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that we found was that when we gave this, there was a lady in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and we were giving it to her. She was 80 or 82, and we gave it to her for her arthritis. She couldn't get her arthritis under control. And in about 7 days, she called me back and she said, my arthritis is gone. She said, this is absolutely remarkable. And I said, yeah, I said, it works pretty fast in most people that have a very high HSCRP. And she said, but that's not why I'm calling you. She said, something you didn't know is I had severe Parkinson's. I couldn't hold food on a fork. I would throw it into the booth in a restaurant over into the next booth. My tremors were so bad. She said, since I've been on this, I no longer have tremors. Well, that lit me up because how did that happen? And I'm very familiar with the dopamine, hydroxydopamine. Hydroxydopamine is a molecule we give to animals to give them Parkinson's so that the pharmaceutical companies can test their Parkinson's medications on those animals. So hydroxydopamine is what causes Parkinson's, not the lack of dopamine. The medical industry has it wrong. So what I did is biochemically went in and showed the reaction between dopamine plus the hydroxyl free radical yields hydroxydopamine. So what do they do in the medical industry? They say, we can't treat and get rid of the reactant, the hydroxyl free radical, let's just reduce the amount of dopamine, or in this case, increase the amount of
it. Actually speed it up. They
yeah,
put more
yeah, so
fuel on the fire.
right. So they prescribe more levodopa or carbidopa, and for a short period of time until their hydroxyl free radical concentration catches up to it, they're Parkinson's free. But pretty soon they've just created a inflammatory response because every molecule of dopamine goes to the liver and regenerates the hydroxyl free radical in the liver. It's just a matter of time before the hydroxyl free radical catches up. So what we do is we say, we find that these Parkinson's patients are producing fairly high levels of dopamine, but it's being converted into the hydroxy form of dopamine. So what the Velasta does is it knocks the hydroxyl free radical out and stops the Parkinson's disease. No more tremors, no more shakes. We find it.
Was she like moderate to severe, mild to moderate?
Severe.
She was severe.
Yeah, she was
on
at the
L-Dopa?
point. Say it again.
Was she on the L-Dopa? Was she on dopaminergic?
She was through Hershey Medical, but hers, she was getting what's called resistant to the synthetic dopamines.
Yeah.
So when we began to look at that chemistry, in prostate cancer, for example, one of the solutions is to knock the testosterone levels down.
Yeah.
And they chemically castrate people. Well, that's not the problem. If testosterone fed cancer, then why aren't these 20-year-olds
seriously
getting cancer? If estrogen causes breast cancer, why aren't these young girls, very high estrogen levels, getting breast cancer? It doesn't happen. Now, why doesn't that happen? The reason is they have the cellular antioxidants that neutralize the hydroxyl free radical when they're young, and they don't get the reaction of testosterone plus the hydroxyl free radical yields hydroxytestosterone. Hydroxytestosterone is a known carcinogen. It's known. Dihydroxyestrogen is also a known carcinogen. So where do those molecules come from? Testosterone plus the hydroxy free radical yields hydroxytestosterone. So what they do, they say, let's cut out the testosterone. As a man, you are never going to get to zero testosterone.
Right.
You have the XY chromosome and you're going to be producing it. Women are never going to get to zero estrogen. So the risk remains. The key is get rid of the hydroxyl free radical. We now have an oral form of glutathione or antioxidant that works. More powerful than glutathione, as a matter of fact.
That's beautiful. How long has this been on the market?
Since we started dosing people in 2013. Okay. And then in 2018, we've never done any sales, marketing. We've never advertised. I just gave it to friends and family. Their cancers went away. They told everybody. It went completely around the world. We're now in 27 countries. We're in all 50 states. The NIH felt it was important enough to allocate about $80 million to see if I was right, and they did. And all the papers are now available to the public. So if you Google NIH and Astaxanthin and disease, particularly you can do cancer, you can do heart disease, you'll find all these research papers since 2016 when they first figured it out. But in 2019, when I did the presentation in Washington, one of the directors at Johns Hopkins come up to me and he said, we're going to try to confirm this. And I volunteered to help. And he said, no, you just need to go away. And I thought, okay, I know where this is headed. Well, they actually allocated a lot of money and they put a lot of research in. So you'll see a lot of recent reports that doctors don't even have an inkling that this information is even out there. Doctors rely on pharmaceutical companies to tell them what to do. Doctors are not researchers. They're not reading these reports. Pharmaceutical companies are reading it, but they keep it sequestered.
Yeah.
But now it's available to everybody who wants to know. It's out there. Life Extension is a great resource for publishing a lot of these research papers. But you can get the direct papers from the NIH now. Since 2015, they've made them all available. And they know what causes cancer.
Right. So is there anyone that should not be taking this product?
We haven't run into anyone yet. There's some people with heart disease that are on blood thinners, warfarin, heparin, or some of the more recent ones. And one of the things that we found is that their sed rates and their clotting factors were affected by taking the astaxanthin. When we began to look at it, we found that these people were taking blood thinners and supplementing with the Velasta, and their blood got very, very thin.
Okay.
So they panicked, and the doctor panicked and said, you need to get off of Velasta. Well, Velasta doesn't thin your blood. It normalizes your blood and changes the electron configuration of the platelets. It makes them less sticky.
Yeah.
So the problem is the warfarin and heparin. You don't give warfarin and heparin to normally blooded people.
Seriously.
So when your blood becomes normal,
it's like, oh my gosh, your blood's thinning more. Do I take you off of the medication, or do I take you off of this
supplement
that is improving your health? This is insane.
The doctors want to keep you on any meds that they can get you on.
Yeah.
That's the real problem here. We can solve this with diet. We can solve this with understanding that complex biochemical reaction that happens in the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm. So
it is complex.
Was it essentially making the blood thinning medication more effective somehow? And because of that, should we also be concerned if someone is on like a high dose steroid regimen or something like this? Is that maybe something to consider?
Yeah,
I'm thinking from a patient perspective.
We don't see any contraindications. We have people taking chemo and Velasta simultaneously.
Okay.
In direct opposition to their doctor. And the result's pretty amazing. Cancer cannot handle a two-pronged attack. So if I have, let's say, a gemcitabine for pancreatic cancer, gemcitabine is a chemo drug given to people with pancreatic cancer. It has an initial hit and seems to work positively, and then it gets resistant. It can no longer penetrate into the pancreas. When we then supplemented with Velasta, with the gemcitabine, it killed the cancer. Astaxanthin stopped or inhibited the gemcitabine resistance, and it allowed pancreatic cancer to be cured. It went away, which is highly unusual for pancreatic. So the chemo works in one way, the astaxanthin works in the other. The cancer cannot deal with a two-pronged attack like that. And it kills it very, very, very quickly.
Okay. I know that we're kind of coming up on time here, so I want to be, considerate of your time, but I do, one more question before we wrap this up. So when someone's dosing, right, obviously you want to find that dose that's high enough to really achieve the things that you're trying to achieve. What are signs that we're starting to get too high? Is it a bowel tolerance? Like, what are we looking for?
If the body, we go off of body saturation. So when it gets into the small bowel, if it cannot be pushed into the body anymore, then it'll come out as a red stool. You'll see your stool turn red. It's not blood. You're not bleeding to death. It's just spillage. It's just spillover.
Okay.
So what we want to do is maintain a slight orange to red tint to your stool. Now, in highly stressed conditions, that will change. You could be taking a dose one day, get into, for example, powerlifting. That's what I do also. I lift weights, where at the same dose level, one day I'll have a red stool. The next day, it would be brown at the same dose level. Well, what that means is that I've just increased my oxidative stress condition and I've used up, I'm absorbing all of it that I'm taking in, which means my body is craving more. It's very easy to control with that maneuver.
Okay. And we don't have to worry about accumulation per se. So if you have, really bright red stool one day, you just reduce the dose, next day you're probably going to be fine. And we're not really looking for symptoms per se. It's just showing that, hey, you didn't absorb all of it, so you're excreting it. That's it.
That's right. Your body is saturated. Once your body is saturated, you can probably start reducing the dose because it'll get redder and redder in your stool.
Okay.
And you just slowly back it down. And taking it in the morning and in the afternoon, it stabilizes everything. And so you're not just getting a plug moving through your small bowel, sort of like a plug flow reactor.
Okay.
And if you can put it in 2 different time frames during the day, that seems to be helpful. The absorption, it allows for recovery. Yeah. So in your first pulse, you'll absorb a lot of it. And it takes a while for the enzymes and the small bowel to clear. So when you come in with the second pulse at noon, say, so you do it at breakfast, you do it at noon, or you do it at 10, do it at 2. Now you've now been more efficient at absorbing that second pulse.
Do you take it with food, without food? Does it
matter? With food.
Okay.
Because it's got olive oil in it. It's high omega-3. And in some people, they don't like the oil on their stomach.
Okay, cool.
So there's a little bit of a reaction there.
That's great. This has been a very fascinating conversation. Like, truly, this has really blown me away by how deep you've gone into, really creating something quite remarkable. Where can people go to learn more about this product and more about you?
Go to velasta.net. All the testimonials there, all the NIH papers are there for the research. We have free consulting. So if we have nurses on staff, the telephone number is 803-470-1913. So if you have any questions regarding Velasta and its effect biologically, those nurses are sitting there ready to answer your questions. There's no charge for that at all. And our whole objective is to stop these diseases. And Dr. Fred Beachy, I don't know whether you've ever heard of Dr. Fred Beachy or not.
Yes.
Up in New York. He and I are very good friends, and he's on the right track. But his is not, he does take Velasta, but his is also, for years, was massive doses of vegetable sources of these antioxidants. He's a raw vegan.
Yeah.
And he took huge amounts of these. So he, in fact, was getting these carotenoids in his bloodstream as antioxidants very early on.
Yeah.
And I think
you know how to tell if someone's raw vegan?
No.
They'll tell you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Oh,
he's been trying to convince me, and I've told him, no. Vegans oftentimes are missing some amino acids, and you notice that they lose weight. There's cannibalism going on. There's essentially 9 amino acids that vegetarians have a tendency to meet. 5 of those essential amino acids are in pumpkin. So just ask a vegetarian, how many pumpkins are you eating a day? Well, 0. They're not getting them. Well, with meat or in a keto type diet, you get all of them. Meat contains all of the amino acids necessary for a good health.
Yeah.
It's a real struggle for vegetarians to get there. And as a result, they lose muscle tone because their muscles are being cannibalized to get those 9 essential amino acids to keep everything flowing properly.
Right. And if you're losing muscle tone, you're losing brain tone. So it's, not just a muscle story. And, I'm not going to give up stakes.
Yeah, I'm not either. I still actually I gave a talk at Rotary up in Eastern Ohio, and one of the guys in the back, I kept telling them that, this keto diet is probably the way to go. And he says, what do you eat for breakfast? And I said, well, for the last 40 years, I get up and I have bacon and eggs every single morning.
There you go.
He said, what? I said, yeah. He said, well, bacon's got all that fat. I said, this is years ago. I said, you're going to find out that fat's actually good for you. Cholesterol is not the problem. It's inflammation that causes cholesterol to plate out in your arteries. It's a lesion. It's a sore. It's a wound caused by the inflammation.
Yep.
And his comment to me, he says, I think you're just bragging. I said, well, I've been doing it now. My cholesterol is about 170, but I don't eat any fruit. No fruit. And it's the fructose. Blueberries are okay, blackberries, but anything that has more than 4 grams of fructose per 100 grams of fruit, you should stay away from.
Yeah. Fructose
cannot be utilized in any cell in your body.
Right.
And it's a primary source of inflammation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So everyone, go to valasta.net, check out this amazing product line. I definitely am fully supporting this. I'm on it myself. My kids, my wife, like everyone, like this is one of those products that is that important. One of those supplements, molecules, whatever you want to call it, right up there with some of my favorites like Fatty 15 and, those types of products. Like this is, in my mind, essential. This is something that we need to be doing to protect ourselves and to protect our loved ones. And especially if you're recovering from something, whether it be a brain injury, a chronic pain disorder, your kiddo has autism or something like that. Like there are so many reasons to be using this product. And I used to use Astaxanthin products in the past and I couldn't really tell a difference, right? And so that's the thing about, you heard the science, like you heard what, they've done at Valasta. Like there is a difference in this product and the other products on the market. So I just want everyone to be able to, have a chance and opportunity to improve their life by trying these products. And so Sam's been, grateful enough to do a discount code for all the listeners. And so if you use the code Crawford at checkout, there will be a discount for you there. We'll put all the information in the show notes so you can have access to it there. So before we wrap up, I want to hear from everyone. Have you experimented with Astaxanthin or other antioxidant protocols? What's your experience been like? What questions do you have about oxidative stress and cellular protection? Share your story in the comments below and let's keep the conversation going. If you're interested in exploring more topics around brain health, longevity optimization, photobiomodulation, and cutting edge functional medicine, check out our other episodes of the Longevity Formula. We dive deep into the science of living longer and living better. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps others find the show. For YouTube, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Everyone, I do appreciate you watching. Sam, I really appreciate your time and all of your vast knowledge. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we sign off here?
Just take control of your health. It's no one's guaranteed the quantity of life. All we really have is the quality of our lives. We could all disappear tomorrow, but quality is, if you don't have the quality of your life in the form of a healthy life, that becomes your obsession, and everything else, your family, your vacations, your children, all become secondary.
Yep. And that's coming from someone that 23 years ago was told that he had 10 minutes to 10 years to live. So Thank you so much for everything that you shared with us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brandon.
We hope today's episode has inspired you to take that next step toward your best self. Remember, the path to longevity is paved with small, daily decisions. Your journey is unique, and every step, every choice brings you closer to your ultimate vision of a healthier, happier life. For more insights, tips, and resources, visit drbrandoncrawford.com.